Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. Well, today we have a treat in store for us. Oh, I don't know how many of you know, but the world has been honored with a visitation via Spotify from the very great, splendiferous, wonderful savior of humanity, champion of femininity. Oh, sorry, of feminism. I forgot. She does it vertically, never horizontally. Oh, sorry. That was a big slip because she is always vertical. And I refer, of course, to the wonderful, the splendiferous, the great, the marvelous, and the wonderful Spotify program, The Misconception of Ambition, hosted by the benevolent, magnitudinous, multitudinous, multifarious, multifaceted Duchess of Sussex, who has been gracious enough to not only honor us with her presence, but to actually rope in a friend of hers called Serena Williams, who, as those of you will know, is the greatest female tennis player of all time. And as Meghan took pains to remind us, and indeed, Serena went along with it on more than one occasion, they're friends. They don't mention, of course, that Serena's husband is in business with Harry and Meghan. So it's rather one hand scratching the other's back. However, without further ado, I will plunge right in by reading what is effectively going to be the only question on the subject. And thereafter, I will be dealing with it because I took notes. I know. I took notes. Maureen Ingleston says, "Dear Lady C, I hear MEGHAN has just done her first podcast for Spotify, and by all accounts it's self-serving and vomit-inducing. I would love to hear your take on it if you are willing to insult your eardrums long enough to listen to it." Well, Maureen Ingleston, the things one does for duty. I cannot say I was happy to listen to it. I found it dire, dreadful, tedious, tiresome, a study in pretentiousness. I mean, vomit-inducing is not far off the mark as far as I'm concerned. Because really, to have to listen to an hour of that horse manure out of the mouth of that rather self-regarding mare, because she's not a filly. Well, several times I thought, I can't endure another minute of this. But you know, one does endure things that one has to, because life isn't always about what you want, as we all know. Meghan, of course, doesn't know that. No. Well, to be dead blunt, I found the whole thing a tremendous downer. I thought it was embarrassingly dreadful. And worse, boring. I mean, I get how she actually captivates some people, because the treacle that pours out of that woman's mouth and this sickly sweet tone that she uses as she Uriah Heep oleaginously sucks up to people is just so, aside from being undignified, so déclassé and off-putting. I mean, you talk about phony baloney. What a phony and what a baloney. And of course, dear sweet Megsie baby could, I have a trauma of all time. The royal family forced me, yes. Aurora, come and comfort Marty. Aurora's looking at me. Come and comfort Marty. Marty's in sympathy with Megsie baby because can you believe that mean, nasty, racist royal family and their silly, nasty organizers and advisors? They made me do an official engagement after my son, the son that I waddled with, as I was pregnant, and I confirmed to everybody on the show I was waddling. Even though, of course, the photographs and all the videotapes proved to the contrary. Because she certainly wasn't waddling, flaunting more likely, but waddling? Oh, I don't think so. And how do you waddle with your knees shut at 8 months on your haunches? However, I suppose we are supposed to ignore all those realities, not to mention fetal Archie's accomplishment of diving between the knees when he was fed up at the end of a day's engagement. Waddling. She was waddling, yes. I mean, after having waddled through 11 months of pregnancy, was it 9 or was it 10? I don't remember. It was so long. I was so tired of carrying that burden, that big belly in 15 months, showing at 3 weeks. Just awful. Yes, Aurora, come and comfort Marty. Marty's having to enact poor Megsie baby's torment when she was waddling as with pregnancy. And then Archie was nearly killed. Can you imagine, Aurora? Nearly died in a fire. In the unit, the housing unit, not even a residence, the housing unit. I mean, can you imagine so low class and déclassé? Sorry, déclassé isn't a word she would know. So low class for a classy chick like me, Megsie baby. I mean, I'm so proud of being classy that I even mentioned that as a teenager, I had classy baby, or classy girl, or classy whatever it was. License plate on my beat-up Nissan. Yes, the one that Daddy says wasn't so beat up, but Daddy's a liar. Everybody's a liar who doesn't agree with me. Everybody's a liar. Everybody's after me. Nobody accepts my version of the truth. My truth. This life is a torment. Can you believe those mean and nasty people? Yes, Aurora. They made me to an official engagement after Archie's heater caught fire in the housing unit when H and I were on an engagement, an official engagement, the one where I was talking about being a woman of colour and meeting all the sisters and just sort of, milking it for all it was worth, because after all, I'm an actress and I've got to do a good act, and I certainly did on that occasion. Can you imagine me with my straight hair and bobbed nose and with almost white skin saying I'm a sister just like those black women in South Africa? Isn't it just classy of me just to be linking with them? And then I go back to the unit, the residential unit, where we had to park poor Archie. who I carried for 15 months, sorry, however long I carried him for, I forget now, it was so long. I mean, yeah, I know the bump was variable. That's what happens when you're as great as I am and are carrying a prince of the United Kingdom. Because he is a prince of the United Kingdom, and those racists are depriving me of the right to call him Prince Archie. Starring Mr. O'Connor, if you remember, Archie Bunker. Oh dear. And I'm sorry, I'm out of character. I need to lapse back into character because Maxie Baby had the greatest torment of her life. Because even though it was spring in South Africa and she was in a cool cotton dress, and Harry was also in summer clothes, as was everybody else, baby Archie, 4.5 months old, because he's wider than me and he's wider than age, he's wider than white, and therefore he has no protection against the heat. And so even though it was 97 degrees in the nursery, we had to have on the heater. And fortunately, the nanny Lauren from Zimbabwe, who used to carry him around in the papoose or whatever it's called, because I'm an American chick and I don't really know what those African terms are, but really I do know what a papoose is because I am American. Not that I recognize the rights of the Native Americans to have land that I've bought. Well, maybe their own land, but not land that I've bought. And baby Archie nearly died. He would have died because the heater caught fire. I'm not surprised if I may now lapse out of my meganomics that if the heater caught fire in the boiling heat. Whoever heard of having a heater in very warm weather and the heater is on for a baby? I mean, since when were babies supposed to be fried to sleep? I mean, the whole show from beginning to end was just stomach-churningly dreadful. And now my observations, because I made notes, but before going into the notes I made, I'm going to tell you what my observations were. Aside from the fact that she opens up with a lie, which we know to be a lie, and which her father has proven is a lie, and she then takes a pot shot at the royal family, but we'll get to all of that in a little while. Meghan doesn't understand that the word ambition, as deployed and employed where she was concerned by civilized people, was a euphemism for a cheap and vulgar hustler, greedy for money. Yes, Meghan, a social climber. Yes, Meghan, greedy for money. You got it right about the fact that they saw through you. You got it wrong that they think that ambition is a bad thing. In palace circles, they can't think ambition is a bad thing because most people are dedicated to the concept of the monarchy. They have ambitions to fulfill their duty to the monarchy. It's not that ambition is a dirty word. It's that ambition is a politesse in much the same way that over a civilized dinner table, you might call someone a prostitute, but you might equally just call them a working girl. Euphemisms are what are employed and deployed when dealing with people that one wishes to be polite about. You do not understand that your pushiness, your vulgarity, your total lack of regard for the civilities are what people were referring to. You picked up the fact that they despised you and looked down upon you. But you thought that it's because you're too ambitious. Well, you are too ambitious. But it's not that ambition is bad. It's that a vaulting ambition, as Shakespeare put it, is bad. Excessive ambition, ambition to the extent that you have displayed, that you possess, is destructive. Look at what you have accomplished. Since you decided that you were going to enter the royal family, kick over the traces and show everybody how it should be done. Look at what you have accomplished. Do you think having accomplished being one of the most unpopular women on earth is something admirable? I'm going to tell you a few of the terms that have been used to describe Meghan Markle's behaviour. She is offensive in the most crass manner. She is overly aggressive. She is pushy to the extent of vulgarity. She is rude, arrogant, churlishly ill-mannered, phonily charming, impatient, inappropriately dominating, and expects praise instead of being called out for her bad behavior. And the whole theme of the program, the podcast, was totally misconceived, because it's not the misconception of ambition as people not accurately perceived it. It's Meghan's misconception of what is acceptable ambition. And I will make the point that both she and Serena Williams seem to have failed to understand that men are called out as well when they behave in the crass, vulgar, destructively ambitious way that they were thinking only women are criticized for. No, men are criticized as well. Now, let's not forget that Serena's husband is in business with Meghan and Harry. That's very important to remember. This was one hand scratching the other's back and vice versa. Maybe they're friends, but the extreme vulgarity with which the friendship was described leads one to believe it's more an alliance than a friendship. Then, of course, Meghan kicks off with a lie. The Procter and Gamble story. When I was 11, I discovered the power I had since when I've been dominating everybody and asserting my power. Meghan, your father has confirmed you never received a reply from Hillary Clinton, Gloria Allred, or anybody else. And he set up that TV interview for you so that you would have pride in your accomplishment and belief in yourself. Turns out he made a big mistake. But it was a mistake made with love, trying to encourage a rather plain, because she certainly was plain, a rather plain but ostensibly endearing child that he loved. And look at where it's got him. Well, my impression was that Serena Williams comes out of the podcast as far more level-headed than Meghan, far more reasonable. She did try to keep things earthed by and large, although once or twice, of course, she understood that she was there to play the victim and milk the whole scenario of victimhood. So she lapsed into, oh yes, I was a victim as well. Everybody's a victim. I don't know anybody who hasn't been a victim of something. Do you hear the Queen bleating about the hard times she's had? Do you hear Catherine Cambridge? Did you hear Princess Margaret? Do you hear the Duchess of Gloucester? Do you hear Princess Alexandra? Do you hear Jennifer Lopez? Let's get off royalty. Let's get to celebrity. Do you hear Jennifer Lopez? No, the woman is too big a star and has too much dignity. The double standards were what struck me, that they thought, or the theme was that women are not allowed to be as ambitious as men, and that women are victims when they are overtly ambitious. Well, and that women's bad behavior is called out when men's bad behavior is not. Well, I'll just throw out two tennis names, since Serena Williams seemed to be sort of grabbing her stand on the corner of that marketplace, that she was unique being a woman, and a woman of colour, I'm sure, was the subtext, that she was being unfairly treated whenever they didn't like her behaviour. Serena Sweetie Pie, shall I mention the names John McEnroe and Ely Nastasi to you? Need I go any further? I hope not. The whole concept was of the podcast was very dated. Meghan has a very pre and immediately post-World War II 1950s, 1960s attitude to the role of women in Western society. Because she lacks the historical perspective that would provide an accurate gauge and to place things in their accurate context, she is womanfully and magnanimously embarking on a charge for a fight that has already been, to a large extent, won. The very people who she hopes to, in her magnanimity, to give a chance to have a place and a voice in the marketplace, already have one. I'm going to get to that in a little while. But I will say her drum beating is very typical of a certain type of political activist, irrespective of which side of the Atlantic you're on, whether it's somebody like Al Sharpton in America or Mike Lynch in Britain. They are embarked on a class struggle. Meghan, of course, has it, the version is a feminist sexual struggle, but it's all under the blanket of a class struggle on behalf of workers who have already achieved not only parity, but often superiority with professionals. Because in England, for instance, blue-collar workers, train drivers, earn more than white-collar workers, say solicitors. Solicitors have to go to school for many years to qualify. Train drivers have a few days of lessons. So what does Megsy Baby do? She calls in one of these cack-handed supposed experts who's now going to tell us about a scenario that took place 50 years and 30 years ago and act as if it's still taking place now. So she calls in Dr. Laura Cray, a UC Berkeley professor and expert on gender in the workplace. Well, I have to tell you, Dr. Cray has certainly not been into the workplace recently, because her views were absolutely pathetically out of date. But they encapsulate an idea of womanhood that is a very petit bourgeois concept stuck in the post-World War II Western economies. You know, if you go back in history, there was, for most of civilization, the world was run off agrarian economies. Men had their role, women had their role. Men worked, women worked. Men were slaves, women were slaves. Men were privileged, women were privileged. They had different roles. They all, though, worked with the exception of upper class women. Everybody else worked. And there were very few middle class people in those days. Then you go from an agrarian to an industrialized economy, which is a 19th century phenomenon, which took place in the Victorian age. People left the land, they went into the towns, and men and women also had to work. Where do you think maids came from? Then in the 20th century, you ended up having a more corporate economy. Again, women worked. Where are these women who have been prevented from working? Yes, I do agree that women often were paid less than men, but were women deprived of the opportunity of working? Certainly only between the 1830s and the beginning of the First World War in 1914. Because once all the men went off to war, the women filled their positions. So these people have no concept of the history of womanhood. They're busy chatting about a post-World War II bubble of prosperity where women were housewives in developed countries. But in undeveloped countries, were they housewives? I don't recall the average Jamaican person being privileged and not being allowed to work. I seem to recall that we had plenty of staff. Plenty. They had to work too. I mean, the whole thing is just farcical. And now I'm going to prove how wrong they are. Because Meghan is fighting for women to have an opportunity that they already have. So I suppose in 3 to 6 months, or maybe 3 years, she'll be claiming that she is the one who gave womanhood the chance to be as successful as we now are. Well, Meghan, may I point out a few of the women who head up massive corporations or headed up? Because let's start with headed up as opposed to presently heading up. Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook. Dawn Steele of Columbia Pictures. Sherry Lansing of Paramount Pictures. Mary T. Barra of General Motors. Corey Barry of Best Buy Company. Gail Boudreau of Anthem. Michelle Buck of the Hershey Company. Deborah Cafaro of Ventas. Safra Katz of Oracle. And Joanne Crevoisera of Tapestry. That's just a few. I think that proved my point. So then we now get to the Mom Fest, because of course Meghan deals in fantasy and Meghan deals in platitudes and Meghan deals in rubbish. And one of the rubbish things that she deals in, aside from the fact that she's a feminist who's accomplished everything, everything, due to her talents as a woman. Yes, she's so clever. And she's now on and on about the deification of the role of mom. Not even motherhood. It's got to be mom. You're a mom and a mom. She's a mom. And Serena is a mom. And okay, there are two middle-aged women who have young children. I get it. My children were born when I was 43. 43-year-olds are usually more excited about being a mother than 23-year-olds because it's less natural. That's right. It's less natural. But the deification of motherhood? Excuse me. Why is anybody deifying motherhood? Motherhood is a natural condition. Motherhood has always been a natural condition. Motherhood is going to remain a natural condition. Whether Meghan Markle, with her pregnant belly that flopped from side to side and dove between her knees when Archie needed to come up for some air at the end of a hard day, having suffered while she was on 4-inch heels, as she now says she was waddling, while in fact she was doing anything but waddling at the time. No, it is ridiculous, but Meghan has to exaggerate everything. Nothing can be placed in its proper context, and nothing can have a sense of proportion. Everything has to be overblown, and the hands. Fortunately, we were spared the hands because all we got was the treacle voice. But the hands everywhere. I mean, really. Then the fire of Archie's fire. How convincing is it? I ask you. That a heater in that heat caught fire. How convincing is that? And since we know that Meghan's remembrances vary, and that that we suffer from her. I was going to say she suffers from post-factual remembrances, but we suffer from her post-factual remembrances. How is it that this is a fact that has just emerged, along with many of her other facts, like crawling in and out of the boot or the trunk or the back, however you want to put it, of the beat-up Nissan Explorer, which wasn't beat up, according to her father, and had nothing wrong with the door. And even if it had something wrong with the driver's door, she could have gone in through the passenger side. And the fiction of her great success in having really written letters, and with her persuasive skills that clearly have worked with Harry, but I don't think they're working with anybody else. But she'd like us to believe they worked with Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble promptly took down that ad because Meghan was just outraged. She was in pain. She was in almost as much pain as when, what was it? Oh, yes. When Archie's heater caught on fire and those wicked, wicked, wicked officials made her fulfill an official engagement, as if she should have been wallowing in the fact that there had been a minor incident that should not be blown out of proportion. But she wanted to blow it out of proportion, according to her. She wasn't allowed to, according to her, blow it out of proportion. She was quite rightly sent to honour the engagement, quite right too. But they are now heartless creatures because they weren't allowing her to stay and wallow and make a big drama out of a minor incident. And let's not forget that when they arrived, everybody was in tears. Everybody was in tears. They were all so distressed. Archie, Prince Archie of Prince Archie of... Oh, sorry, he's not a prince yet, is he? But they were in tears. Everybody was in tears. Prince Archie's life had possibly been endangered, but it wasn't, because he was with Lauren, the nanny from Zimbabwe, in her Zimbabwean version of a papoose. I tell you, doesn't all of this just make you sick to your stomach? This woman, with her hyperbole, her constant exaggerations, her hysteria, her, quite frankly, sick-making sickness, just beyond belief, beyond belief. And every little thing with her, as I have to tell you, in my experience with my mother, with people of narcissistic bent, and people of antisocial bent, and people of manipulative bent, and people of hysterical bent, everything has to be blown out of all proportion. And if you're going to be making a decision, as people make all their lives, it becomes a monumental cause for martyrdom as you struggle to make the right decision. And the subtext of all of this was that the people to whom Meghan is aiming this podcast are somehow going to be educated and enlightened by Meghan's splendiferous messianic wonderfulness and her self-belief in her godly qualities, and in the specialness not only of her, but of Serena, who, again, I will give her due, she did try to rein things in. And she did, by and large, represent herself as being reasonable when she wasn't forced into gorging on the feast of self-pity and victimhood. And the arrogance, the vulgarity, the totally distasteful lack of tone. You know, they are speaking about Anna Wintour, and Anna Wintour is not given the respect that is her due as a very successful editress. And notice how I put it. I'm being mischievous. She's called Anna, and how grateful Anna was. So Anna Wintour is now a subservient to Meghan, and obviously, by extension, to Serena. Of course, the subtext to all of that is that Edward Enninful and Meghan fell out over her editing, in quotes, of Vogue magazine and her totally bizarre and pretentious behavior and her brain dead contributions and her grabbing of attention and credit. But so now in her mind, she shouldn't be appreciative of the fact that Edward Enninful gave her an opportunity and that Anna Wintour gave Serena Williams an opportunity to star. No, they are the ones who have endowed Anna, no surname even, just Anna, with, like Anna is the maid. Then she follows it up with her crass, absolutely crass, and prideful and proud and rather distasteful insertion of reminding us how classy she is by saying that when she was driving her Nissan with a license plate, classy girl. I mean, really, Meghan? That's like a hooker who's married respectably, telling everybody about how they should be charging for the milk. It's as vulgar as that. You are in a world where you shouldn't even be using the word classy, much less reminding people who might have missed that you're classy for very good reason, because you are not what you would call classy. But you're reminding them that you have always been classy, because you've got class with a capital K. And you used to have a license plate called Classy Girl. I mean, the woman is beyond salvation. Beyond salvation. Who I was proud to see doesn't need salvation is Serena, because she made the point that she is from Compton, and she is proud of being from Compton. And there were two sections where Compton came up. And I was very proud of Serena Williams for embracing her background, because you should always embrace your background, irrespective of what it was, as long as it wasn't shameful. And there is nothing shameful in having come from Compton. As she rightly pointed out, so did Kevin Costner. Well, it ends with Megsy Baby asking Serena to describe herself in 3 words: as a child and then as an adult. And I thought that was a clever touch. We need to give credit where credit is due, and credit is due there. That, in my opinion, was the only part of the whole of the podcast that was actually creditable, and that you thought, that's really well done. The rest of it was a total embarrassment. Yawnsville for days. I don't know who Spotify thinks is going to want to look or listen, I suppose would be a better way of putting it, to this rubbish. I mean, I've had to listen to it, and I dread being asked to listen to the other 11, because I'm not sure that I can continue swimming in that which we all do in the morning and immediately flush. I don't want to have to swim once a week in a bowl full of Meghan's fecal matter. But I suppose if you all want me to do so, I will rise to the occasion and do so gladly, even though it's distasteful. I will be glad to do it. And now I'm going to read out 1 or 2 comments from people, because I love some of the comments that come in here, and they are worth repeating. Gorilla BFF says, I've always noticed that when Meghan Markle addresses feminist issues, she focuses on ones that are largely the focus during the 1980s. She's not modern in her mandate. Her ideas in all realms are actually quite outdated, and much like all her ideas, they are already run or simply not good, not reasonably viable. She is a model of nothing but self-important vapidity. I couldn't agree more. My dear, you have hit the nail firmly on the head. Chrissy Richards says, Lady C, please, is it true that there was a fire in Archie's bedroom in Africa? Why has this story come out now? She is supposedly telling it on her podcast. What is her endgame? I'm sure you can find the truth. The dogs are gorgeous. XX. Why has this story come out now? Because she needed something to embroider the narrative of her podcast. And she needed an instance of victimhood and suffering. There she is in South Africa with all of those people who are simply going about mundane things like walking miles for water and avoiding knife crime on a daily basis and being ravished, and poverty and suffering and infection without medical treatment, all those little ordinary things that are just trivialities compared to Meghan's suffering when Archie's heater caught on fire at the height of spring when the weather's hot. Oh, of course, you would have imagined, had it happened in the timely manner that one would have expected it to have happened in, that there would have been a timely revelation when she was speaking to Tom Bradby, and nobody's asked me how I am. Oh, no, sorry, it was. Nobody's asked me if I'm okay. Well, the royals, did they know that she had suffered such a trauma as Archie's heater at the height of spring in the warm weather, catching on fire? Did they know? Did they ask her if she was okay? No, they didn't know. Maybe it hadn't happened yet. Maybe it didn't happen until it was required to happen. Along the lines of the comment that Harry says was one thing and Meghan says was another, the racist comment. Oh, all these racists, oh, these people, dreadful people. Poor Megsie baby. Oh, God, I don't know how she copes. Isn't she wonderful and marvelous and brave and courageous? And doesn't she have the most wonderful womanly character to overcome so much adversity? A childhood of privilege, oh sorry. She was working from the age of 6 months in Target. That's where she acquired her taste for clothes. Then, when she was 9 months old, she was running against Usain Bolt and beating him. Let's not forget that. Oh, sorry, we don't know it yet. That's a post-factual remembrance that will doubtless come when she's giving Usain Bolt's eulogy, not to the assembled crowd, but to everybody who she's going to beam the eulogy to, in much the same way that she beamed the valedictorian address, not to the students of Immaculate Heart at the last graduation, but just to the world at large. I Gewalt, I tell you. M. Corbett says she was in the big hurry to get back to Hollywood to become an A-lister. She couldn't even see that she was already on a much more powerful platform. M. Corbett, you couldn't be more accurate. She stepped off Mount Everest and has gone into a dung heap. And she's too dumb and unsophisticated to have figured that one out. And too impatient and greedy. Well, water seeks its own level, and she's right down there in the gutter, which is where she aimed to be and now is. She only thinks that in the gutter, her gutter, we should think it smells like Diorissima, and that we should think that the dirty water is pristine. Andrea Royd says, according to her Spotify broadcast, she bemoans she was stifled of ambition by joining the royal family the moment she met Harry. Yes, I bet she was. Her wings were clipped. See, it is yet again the royal family. Payback time. I bet she had ambition. She forgets who was paying for her wedding and UK lifestyle. He who pays the piper calls the tune. Yes, but if she hadn't been a third-rate hustler and she had been a first-rate operator like Lily Safra or that Harrison girl, Pamela Harrison. Sorry, Pamela Harriman. Pamela Digby, Churchill, Hayward, etc., etc. Harriman, not Harrison, Harriman. Pamela Harriman. Had she been an ace operator like Pamela, who was the pool de luxe par excellence, or Lily Safra, who was another pool de luxe par excellence, she would have ended up the way they ended up. Maybe not stifled with honours, but certainly stifled with privilege and money and position. Instead of which she has exposed herself. Because her ambition was never to join the royal club. It was to use the royal rank to her commercial and worldly advantage. And poor little Meg's baby didn't understand that when you jump off Everest without a parachute and you land in the dung heap, you're going to be very lucky to have not broken a lot of bones and just stink to high heaven. All because of your own actions. And we will end with Ferocious Gumby, who says, I just read in the Daily Mail that Meghan Markle's podcast has finally come out, and Serena Williams is the first guest. If that weren't incredible enough, the first thing Meghan talks about is the Procter & Gamble dish soap story. Then a litany of all the amazing things she has done throughout her entire life to single-handedly save women from virtual extinction. She also reassures us all that even the most ordinary, low-status, everyday people can do their bit, big block capitals, even if they're not an incredibly admirable and influential person like her on the world stage in big block capitals. This woman really does have delusions of greatness. I assume Gloria Steinem will be next! Exclamation mark. I hear the thing is being ripped apart on social media for being that one unforgivable thing. Boring, it certainly was. People can barely get through it without laughing or falling asleep. It's true. I actually often laughed, I have to say, throughout it. I thought this woman is truly bizarre. So, to return, without laughing or falling asleep, as it is about 85% about her, and she keeps on bringing it back and bringing it back to her, and how magnificent she is in being an archetype who will change the world selflessly and nobly. As if these basic issues weren't more or less cleared up and changed back in the 70s. I just do not see how a sensate person, I mean not in a coma, can be so utterly behind the times and irrelevant. Ferocious Gumby, you have said it so much better than I would have said it that I have allowed you to speak for me, yourself, and all of us. And on that note, I would say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and remember, questions and comments, please. I need them. God bless. Thank you. Bye-bye.